My name is Florence Henderson. I'm 95 years old. If you are watching this, I am dead. I was a homemaker and I was a baker. One of those women who never thought of it as a title, even though it was the work of my entire life. I kept people fed. I kept the house warm. I kept birthdays from feeling empty. I kept grief from getting too loud by giving it something to chew on. And now I'm gone. I've tried to say that sentence in my head in a way that didn't sound dramatic. I'm gone. Like I'm just out to the store, like I'll be back with a loaf of bread tucked under my arm. But no, this is the truth, and I promised myself I would be truthful in the last thing I ever said. If you're my granddaughter, if it's you, sweetheart, the way I can still picture you at 9 years old with your knees pulled to your chest on my kitchen chair, stealing the chocolate chips right out of the bowl and thought I wasn't looking, then I need you to keep watching. I need you to let me finish. I know you'll want to slam the laptop shut. I know you'll want to say, "Not now, Grandma," as if you can bargain with video like it's a person. But please, let me get this out of me. I didn't make this because I wanted to be remembered as some saint. I'm not. I'm just an old woman with flour in her fingerprints, even now in my mind, even now when I imagine my hands. And I made a choice a long time ago that I thought was protecting you. It wasn't protection. It was fear wearing an apron. I suppose I should tell you how it started. How I knew the end was close enough to touch. It wasn't like the movies. There was no big collapse in a grocery store aisle, no ambulance lights reflected in my eyes. It was smaller. It was humiliating in its quietness. It began with tiredness that didn't make sense. Not the usual tiredness of being 95, the kind you can laugh about. "Oh, honey, I'm old. Of course I'm tired." This was different. This was like my bones had been filled with wet sand. I'd stand at the sink and feel like I'd been standing there for hours, only to look at the clock and realize it had been 7 minutes. I'd sit down to peel apples. Granny Smith, always Granny Smith for pie, because they hold their shape, and I know you know that because I taught you. And my fingers would cramp so badly I'd drop the peeler and just stare at my hand like it had betrayed me. Then there was the breath. I started getting short of breath doing nothing. Just walking from the bedroom to the living room, the same hallway I've walked a million times, and suddenly I'd be holding the door frame, trying to be discreet, trying not to make it a thing. Because when you get old, everything becomes a thing, and everyone looks at you like you're a glass ornament they're afraid to touch. And there was a morning, I remember it too clearly, that I woke up and the room wasn't spinning, but my body felt wrong, heavy, like gravity had turned up overnight. My ankles were swollen, now little, enough that the skin looked shiny, stretched tight like the casing on a sausage. I pressed my thumb into it, and the dent stayed there. I stared at that dent for a long time. It felt like watching the earth except the footprint. I finally let my doctor's office talk me into coming in. I'd been putting it off. "It's nothing," I said. "It's just age." I said that like age is a harmless explanation, like it's not the biggest thief of them all. The doctor's office smelled the same as every doctor's office. Disinfectant and paper and that faint plastic smell from the exam table covering. I hate that smell. It makes you feel like you're already half a patient before anyone even touches you. The waiting room television was on too loud. Some daytime show where everyone smiles too hard. And the magazines were old, corners curled like they'd given up hope of being read. I sat in one of those chairs that never quite supports your back, the kind that makes your spine feel like it's apologizing for being there. I remember the hum of the air conditioner and the tiny cough of the woman 2 seats away, and the way my purse strap felt like it was cutting into my shoulder, even though it wasn't. They took my blood pressure twice. The nurse didn't say much, but she got quieter the second time. Quiet has its own language. It's the first language you learn when you're a woman trying to read the room before anyone tells you the truth. The doctor came in. Dr. Patel, kind eyes, always a little rushed, but not cruel about it. He asked me questions I've answered 100 times. Dizziness, appetite, sleep, bowel movements. Isn't it something how at the end of life the world becomes so practical? Questions are so unromantic, as if your whole existence can be traced by how often you use the bathroom. He listened to my heart. He frowned just a little. He pressed on my legs and watched the skin. He ordered blood work to be safe. He said, and then an EKG. They stuck the little cold pads on my chest, and I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with skin. The machine drew its jagged lines like a child scribbling storm clouds. After that, they sent me to get more blood drawn. Vials and vials. I watched the dark red fill them up and thought, how many little bottles of me can they take before I stop being me? They called me back in 2 days later. That's the part that makes you understand the clock has started. When a doctor says, let's just keep an eye on it, you can pretend. When they say, can you come in sooner? You feel the invisible hand tighten around your throat. Dr. Patel sat down instead of standing. Know the language. When they sit, it means they're about to take away your illusions gently, like pulling a blanket off someone sleeping. He talked about my kidneys, about how the lab numbers weren't what they should be, about how my heart sounded tired. That was his word, tired. My heart was tired. I remember thinking, well, it has been working for 95 years. Hasn't it earned the right to be tired? He said, congestive heart failure, in a voice that tried to make it sound like a technical term instead of a sentence. He said, fluid retention and diuretics and monitoring. He said, at your age, Florence, we're not looking at fixing everything. We're looking at comfort and quality. Comfort and quality. Those words, they sound like a hotel brochure, but what they meant was, this is not going to turn around. He explained that the swelling was fluid, that my body was holding on to water like it didn't know how to let go. He said my kidneys weren't clearing what they used to. He said my heart wasn't pumping as strongly as it should. He said the word decline, and I heard descent. I asked him how long. He didn't give me a number. Doctors don't like numbers when the numbers aren't kind. He said it varies. He said weeks, months. He said it's hard to predict. And then he said the truest thing anyone said to me in that room. But I think you can feel it, can't you? And I could. That's what it is, really. You feel the clock start to tick, not loudly. It's not a big booming sound. It's like a small, precise clicking inside the walls of your life. Suddenly the quiet moments aren't just quiet. They're counted. Suddenly you notice how many mornings you have left to smell coffee. How many times you'll get to fold a warm towel from the dryer. How many times you'll hear your name said out loud by someone who means it. I went home with a paper bag of prescriptions and a folder full of instructions printed in black ink. As if black ink is enough to prepare you for the end. That night I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I've stood for decades. The countertop has a little nick on the edge from when your mother was a teenager and dropped a glass mixing bowl. I never fixed it. I liked the nick. It proved we lived there. It proved we weren't just passing through. I looked at that nick and thought, Florence, you were running out of time and you were still holding something in your mouth like a stone. And that stone has your name on it, sweetheart. But before I can say that part, before I can say the thing that has been sitting in my chest for years like a trapped bird, I need to tell you who I was before I became the kind of woman who keeps secrets for love. Because secrets don't start as secrets. They start as choices. Small ones. Practical ones. Not now. Not yet. When they're older. When it won't hurt. And then you look up and you're 95 and you realize you built your whole house around the locked room. So, childhood. I was born in 1930. I'll say that number and it still feels like another country. The world I came from smelled like coal smoke and laundry soap and damp wood. Not the pretty kind of damp that people pay money for in cabins. The kind that crawls into your clothes and stays there. The kind that makes your sheets feel cold even after you've slept in them all night. We didn't have much. People always say that. We didn't have much. Like it's a badge, like it makes you noble. It doesn't. It just makes you careful. It makes you learn early that waste is a sin and silence is sometimes safer than asking for more. My mother, your great-grandmother, she could stretch a meal like she could stretch $1, like she could stretch a day when she didn't want it to end. She made soups that tasted like patience. She could turn stale bread into something that felt like Sunday. I remember the sound of her knife on the cutting board, steady, like a metronome. I remember the way she would tie her apron strings behind her back with one quick motion, like she'd been born knowing how. And my father was a quiet man with hands that looked older than the rest of him. Work hands. He'd come home with dirt under his nails and exhaustion behind his eyes, and still he'd pick me up sometimes. Just once, just a lift, just enough to make me laugh. And I'd feel like the luckiest thing in the world. There's one day, one specific day that lives in me like a photograph you can't throw away. It was February 14th, 1942. I remember because it was Valentine's Day, and someone at school had made paper hearts and handed them out like the world wasn't at war. The air outside was sharp enough to cut. The kind of cold that makes your nose sting and your teeth hurt. We had a little stove in the house, and it did its best, but the corners of the rooms always stayed cold. Like the cold was hiding there waiting. That morning my mother was baking, not because it was a holiday, because flour was available, and she'd gotten her hands on a small sack of sugar. And when you're poor, you don't wait for permission to make something good. You make it when you can. She was making bread, plain, white bread, nothing fancy. But when you've grown up with hunger as a background noise, the smell of bread is like someone turning the radio off. It's peace. It's the only kind of peace you can eat. I remember sitting at the table with my school books open, pretending to study. The steam on the window made everything outside look blurred, like the world was shy. My mother had her hair pinned up, and there was a little dusting of flour on her cheek, like a pale fingerprint. She didn't notice it. She was humming, not a song exactly, just a sound. I think she hummed when she was trying not to worry. And I remember the knock on the door. Not a neighbor knock. Not the quick tap-tap of someone borrowing something. It was heavy, official. Like the door itself had become part of something bigger. My father went to answer. I heard his boots on the floorboards. I heard the hinge creak. I heard voices. Low, clipped. I couldn't make out the words at first. Then my mother stopped humming. That's the part that makes my throat tighten even now, even after all these years. The way her humming just died, like a candle snuffed out by a fingertip. There was a telegram, a war telegram. The kind that changes the way a house breathes. It wasn't for us, not exactly. It was for our neighbor. But the delivery boy had the wrong address. He stood there, young, nervous, holding grief like it was a package he didn't want to drop. My father told him, wrong house, and the boy apologized and turned to go. But the message had already arrived in our kitchen anyway. It had already taught me something. that life can knock without warning. And it doesn't care if you're in the middle of homework. It doesn't care if bread is rising. It doesn't care if it's Valentine's Day. After the boy left, my mother started humming again, but it was different. It was shaky, forced, like she was trying to paste normal back onto the day. And that's when I learned the first rule that shaped me: you keep going. You do the next right thing, because stopping doesn't change anything. So I did my homework. My mother baked the bread. My father went to work. And the bread came out of the oven, and it was golden. And the crust crackled when she pressed it. And the smell filled the whole house like forgiveness. She cut a slice for me. She spread a thin layer of butter, thin because butter was precious, and she handed it to me like it was a gift. I ate it slowly, and I remember thinking, if I can always make something like this, if I can always create warmth even when the world is cold, then maybe I can survive anything. That thought became my whole life. Sweetheart. That thought became my religion. Warmth, food, care, the small holy acts. That's why I baked. That's why I became the woman who shows up with a casserole when someone dies, the woman who brings cookies to the new neighbors, the woman who makes pies when she doesn't know what else to say. Because I grew up learning that sometimes you cannot stop the bad thing from coming, but you can put bread in someone's hands when it does. Later, when I was older, I started working in a bakery. Not a glamorous one. A small place with a bell on the door and flour dust that never fully settled. The kind of bakery where the mornings start before the sun remembers it exists. It was 1951 when I first walked in there for work. I remember because I was 21 and I wore a dress I'd ironed so carefully the fabric still smelled faintly of heat. I didn't own many nice things, but I owned pride. I walked in with my hair rolled and pinned, and my hands were clean, and I was terrified they would look at me and see I didn't belong. The bakery was already alive. Yeast smelled sweet and sharp at the same time. The ovens exhaled heat like dragons. There was a radio on in the back playing something cheerful that didn't match the hour. And there was Mr. Kaplan, the owner, a man with thick eyebrows and a voice like gravel, barking orders like he was conducting an orchestra made of dough. He looked at me and said, "You know how to work?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Good. Then work. No welcome. No orientation. Just prove it." My first job was washing bowls. Giant metal bowls, heavy, slick with grease. My arms aching from lifting them. I stood at the sink with hot water turning my knuckles red. And I scrubbed and scrubbed until my shoulders burned. And I remember thinking, this is honest. This is real. This is how you earn a place in the world. Then they moved me to mixing. Flour clouds in the air, sticking to my eyelashes, dusting my hairline. I'd go home with flour in the creases of my palms. I'd wash my hands and still find it later, like the day had left a little note behind. There's one morning I can still see as if it's happening right now. It was early December, 1953, I believe. The kind of cold morning where the sidewalk looks like it's holding its breath. We had a rush order for a church event, something like 200 rolls and sheet cakes and pies. Mr. Kaplan was in a mood, snapping at everyone, pacing. The proofing cabinet was acting up. The temperature wasn't holding. Dough was rising too slow. And then, because life loves to pile on, the new girl dropped an entire tray of unbaked rolls. A whole tray. They hit the floor with a soft, tragic sound, like pillows falling if pillows were made of hours of labor. She froze, just stood there staring at the mess. Her face went white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mr. Kaplan saw it, and his face turned the color of a bad tomato. He started yelling, really yelling. not just irritated, but furious like her mistake was a personal insult. And the girl. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her eyes filled up, and I saw it. I saw the moment she decided she was worthless. I saw the shame wrap around her like a wet coat. Something in me broke open. I stepped between them. Me, Florence Henderson. Not loud, not important. Just a worker with flour on her apron. I said, "It's dough." Mr. Kaplan stared at me like I'd spoken another language. I said it again, quieter. "It's dough. We can make more." He sputtered something about time and money and standards and carelessness. And I said, "She didn't kill anyone. She dropped dough." The bakery went silent. Even the radio felt quieter, like it leaned in to listen. Mr. Kaplan looked at the girl and then at me, and his anger didn't vanish, but it moved. It had to find another place to go. He turned away, muttering, and went back to the ovens like he was afraid of what he might say if he stayed. The girl looked at me like I'd handed her a life jacket, and we cleaned it up. We scraped the dough off the floor. We remade the tray. We worked faster. We got it done. But what I carried from that day wasn't pride. It was something like a vow. I learned that work is not just what you produce. It's how you treat the people beside you while you're producing it. I learned that mistakes are part of being alive, and cruelty is a choice, not an accident. And I learned that if you have the power to make a room safer, even for one trembling, embarrassed girl, you do it. Because you don't know what kind of knife she's already carrying inside herself. That's what baking taught me, beyond measurements and timing. It taught me that life is mostly a series of small salvations. You burn a batch, you start again. You drop a tray, you make more. You run out of sugar, you improvise. You keep your hands moving. You keep your heart soft enough that it doesn't turn into stone. That was my philosophy, sweetheart. Keep going, keep making warmth, keep feeding people, keep softening what the world hardens. And maybe that's why I convinced myself that what I was doing, what I didn't tell you, was just another kind of warmth. Because there are different kinds of hunger, aren't there? There's the hunger in the stomach. There's the hunger for love. There's the hunger for belonging. There's the hunger to know where you come from, the hunger for the truth. And I fed you so many things, and I let you go hungry for one thing I was supposed to give you. I can hear my own voice getting tight now. I can hear the old woman in me trying to back away, trying to soften it with a joke, trying to say, "Oh, Florence, don't be so dramatic." But this is the final message. This is the last time I get to be your grandmother in any way that matters. I don't get to hide behind pie crust and polite smiles anymore. I keep thinking about the first time you helped me bake. You were so small you had to stand on the chair, and I was terrified you'd fall, but you were determined. You had that look, God, that look, like you were born to insist on being part of things. I remember the feel of your little hand in mine as I showed you how to crack an egg against the edge of the bowl. Not too hard, not too soft. You did it too hard and shell went everywhere, and you looked up at me ready to cry, and I laughed. I laughed and said, "That's all right. We'll pick it out, we'll pick it out." I said that so many times. About eggshells, about lumps in batter, about burnt edges, about life. And all this time there's been something in our batter I didn't pick out. I just kept stirring, hoping no one would notice. I want to take you back. Just one more story, just one more thread, because it's all tangled together in me. The old kitchen table, the bakery floor, the way I learned to keep going, the way I learned to protect people by swallowing the hardest truth. Because there was a day when I realized that love can be a kind of lying, and I told myself it was mercy, and I have been living inside that decision for so long that sometimes I forget what the air feels like outside it. It was the summer of 1967. It was hot, the kind of heat that makes the air in the kitchen feel thick, and I had the windows open, but there was no breeze, just the sound of cicadas outside like the world was sizzling. I remember the smell of overripe peaches on the counter, the way they were starting to go soft at the seams, and I remember thinking I needed to use them up before they turned. I remember thinking about everything back then. Use it up before it turns. And that day I was making a peach cobbler, and the dough was too sticky, and I kept adding flour, just a little, just a dusting, trying to get it right, trying to make it hold together, trying to make it behave. And my hands were covered, and my apron was covered, and my mind was somewhere else entirely because the phone had rung earlier and the voice on the other end had said something that made my stomach drop, something that made the whole world tilt a degree off center. And I stood there with peaches and sugar and cinnamon. And I stood there with peaches and sugar and cinnamon and my hands full of sticky dough. And the phone cord still felt like it was wrapped around my wrist even after I'd hung it back up, because the voice on the other end had said, "Florence, we need to talk about the baby." The baby. That word can be a blessing or a bomb. I remember I leaned my hip against the counter because my knees suddenly didn't feel loyal. The peaches were sweating in their own juice. Flies kept trying to land, and I kept swatting them away like I could swat away what I'd just heard. And I told myself, right there, before I even knew what the rest of my life would look like, I told myself, whatever happens, I will make it warm. I don't know when I decided warmth meant silence. I don't know when I decided the truth was something you had to earn, like a grown-up coat you weren't allowed to wear until you were older. I just know it happened. I know I did it. I know I'm the one who kept stirring and kept stirring and kept pretending it would all come out smooth. I want to do something first. Before I go where I'm supposed to go with this, I want to leave you with practical things, because that's who I am. I'm Florence. I fix what I can. I label the jars. I write the recipe down. I make sure the oven is off. I make sure people have something to hold on to when the room gets dark. So listen to me, all of you, but especially you, my family. When someone dies, everyone gets sentimental and then everyone gets stupid. People start making decisions with their throat instead of their head. Don't do that. Grief is a fog. In fog, you drive slow and you keep both hands on the wheel. Here are the things I want you to do, the things I learned the hard way from living 95 years and watching families tear themselves to pieces over a lamp and a spoon. First, don't rush to give away anything in the first 2 weeks. Not my clothes, not my dishes, not my mixing bowls, not my recipe cards, not the stupid little glass bird on the windowsill. Put it all in one room if you have to. Close the door. Grief makes you want to handle it just so you can stop feeling. But you'll regret what you toss when you're trying to breathe. Second, if there's money anywhere, don't announce it like it's a game show prize. I'm not saying hide things from each other. I'm saying be quiet until you know what you're looking at. There's a difference. Make a list. Write it down. Account numbers, insurance papers, the deed, the little envelope people always forget about. If you find cash, count it with someone else present and write the amount down. Not because you don't trust each other, but because memory gets slippery when your heart is broken. Third, if you have to deal with my house, if it's being sold, if it's being cleaned out, open the windows even if it's cold. I mean it. Old houses hold smells the way people hold secrets. Air it out. Let the place breathe. You'd be amazed what feels possible after you let fresh air in. And let me talk to you the way I used to talk to you in the kitchen, sweetheart, because this is the advice that actually matters, the advice that made my life livable. If you bake, you don't have to be fancy. You just have to be steady. If you're making bread, don't kill the yeast with hot water, warm water. If you can hold your finger in it and it feels like bath water, that's right. If it stings, it's too hot. Proof it in a place that isn't drafty. Cover it with a clean towel, not one that smells like onions. Yes, towels can smell like onions. Don't argue with me. And if the dough looks ugly, if it's lumpy or it tears, let it rest. Dough needs rest the way people do. You force it, it fights you. You give it time, it softens. If you're making pie crust, don't overwork it. Cold butter, cold hands. If your hands run hot, run them under cold water and dry them. I'm serious. And when you roll it out, don't roll like you're angry. Gentle. Let the pin do your work. And if it cracks, patch it. The pie doesn't care if the crust has a scar. People do, but pie doesn't. And for God's sake, if you're making cookies, don't eyeball the salt. A pinch isn't a pinch to everyone. Measure it, especially if you're doubling recipe. You can't fix too much salt. You can't love your way out of too much salt. You throw it out and start again. That's a life lesson too. Now here's the thing I want you to hear underneath all of that. The thing that matters more than bread and pie and paperwork. Do the boring, responsible thing before you do the dramatic, emotional thing. Pay the bill before you buy the flowers. Put gas in the car before you go on the long drive. Drink water before you decide your headache means you're dying. Call the doctor before you decide you're fine. Apologize before you start building a story in your head about why you're right. The world is full of people who would rather have a grand gesture than a steady habit. Grand gestures make you feel good for one day. Steady habits save you for 40 years. And now I have to stop hiding behind usefulness. Now I have to say it. Emma. I'm talking to you, Emma. My sweet girl. My darling granddaughter, with your stubborn chin and your laugh that always came out too loud in restaurants and made me proud because you didn't know how to shrink yourself. Emma, you are adopted. And if that sentence hits you like a slap, if it makes your ears ring, I need you to know something right away. You were not a consolation prize. You were not a secret we kept because we were ashamed of you. You were wanted. You were chosen. You were loved so hard it scared me. But I still lied to you. I lied by omission, which is a fancy way of saying I let you live in a story that wasn't fully yours. I let you look in mirrors and wonder where your nose came from, where your dimples came from, why your hair did what it did. I listened to you make jokes about bad Henderson jeans when you burned something, and I smiled and I swallowed it. And I know what you're thinking, because you're smart and you don't let things slide once you grab onto them. You're thinking, who else knew? Your mother knew. Your grandfather knew. I knew. We all knew. And we all agreed. Quietly, without saying it as brutally as I'm saying it now, that we would wait. We said, when she's older. Then you got older. We said, when she's done with school. Then life got busy. We said, when the time is right. And the truth is, the time was never going to feel right. Because I didn't want to be the one to put pain in your hands. I didn't want to see your face change. I didn't want to be the reason you looked at your own life and felt like someone had moved the furniture without telling you. So I made you pay for my cowardice. I want to tell you how it happened. Not every detail. Because some of it isn't mine to tell, but enough so you understand it wasn't casual. It wasn't careless. It was desperate. It was love mixed with panic. The way people do when they don't know how to be brave. You were a baby, a newborn, the kind of tiny that fits in the crook of an elbow like you were made to be held. You came into the family like a little miracle dropped on the doorstep of our lives at a time when we were falling apart in quiet ways. There was grief in the house then. There was exhaustion. There was that tight feeling in the air that comes when people are smiling, but their eyes look like they haven't slept in years. And then you arrived, and suddenly there was a reason to make the house gentler. Suddenly there was a reason to put music on again. Suddenly there was a reason to bake for no occasion at all, just because a baby deserved a home that smelled like vanilla. You were ours, not by blood, but by every other thing that matters. And still, Emma, I should have told you when you were old enough to ask. I should have sat you down when you were, 12, 13, and said, there's something important about your story. I should have trusted your heart to be big enough. I should have trusted you to handle the truth with the grace I've seen you show strangers. I didn't. I kept you in the dark because I was afraid you'd leave us in your mind. I was afraid you'd look at your mother differently. I was afraid you'd think love was a lie. And that's the ugliest part, isn't it? I was trying to protect love, and I used a lie to do it, like pouring poison into soup and calling it medicine. Emma, I am so sorry. I am sorry for every time you ask, even casually, do I get my curly hair from you, Grandma? And I answered like it was a simple question. I am sorry for every family tree project at school. I remember one. 5th grade. He came home with that big sheet of paper and those little boxes for names and dates. You sat at my table with your tongue sticking out concentration, and you asked me for great-grandparents' names, and I gave them to you. And I watched you write them down, and I felt sick. I told myself, it's harmless. I told myself, she's a child. But you weren't just a child. You were a person. You were a person building your sense of self, brick by brick. And I handed you bricks that didn't belong to your house. I don't know what you'll feel when you hear this. Anger, betrayal, relief, confusion, all of it at once. And I won't be there to take it. That's the part that makes me hate myself the most. Because I'm leaving you with a mess and no hands to help clean it up. And I need you to hear this too. You have every right to be furious. Don't let anyone tell you she meant well, like that erases what it did to you. Meaning well is not a magic spell. It doesn't undo damage. It doesn't give you back the years you should have had with the truth. If you want to scream at me, do it. Say my name out loud. Call me selfish. Call me a coward. I will take it. I earned it. But please, please, don't let this make you doubt that you were loved. Emma, you were loved in the way I know how to love. With food, with attention, with showing up, with remembering how you take your tea, with saving you the corner piece of cake because you always liked the crispy edge. You were loved when you were sick and I sat by the bed and pressed a cool cloth to your forehead. You were loved when you were 16 and you thought your life was ending because of a boy. And I made you sit at my table and eat toast even though you said you weren't hungry. And I told you eat anyway. Your body doesn't deserve to suffer just because your heart is dramatic. You were loved when you were grown and busy and you forgot to call sometimes. I never stopped loving you. Not once. But love isn't the same as honesty, and I failed you there. And now I have to apologize for the other thing, too. The simpler thing, the thing that sounds selfish to say, but is still true. Emma, I'm sorry I'm leaving you. I'm sorry I'm dying in a way that makes everything feel unfinished. I'm sorry you have to go on in a world that doesn't have my hands in it anymore. I'm sorry you'll reach for the phone and then remember. I'm sorry you'll smell cinnamon somewhere and it will hit you like grief out of nowhere in a grocery store aisle. And you'll have to swallow it because people don't know what to do with someone else's sorrow. I'm sorry I won't be there for your next birthday. I'm sorry I won't be there when you have a hard day. And you need someone to say, come over, I'll feed you. I'm sorry. I won't be there to see who you become next. Because you were always becoming something new. I wish I could have been braver sooner. I wish I could have told you and then lived long enough to sit with you through it, to answer questions, to help you find whatever you want to find. I wish I could have gone with you, held your hand while you opened doors that were closed to you. And maybe you will do that now. Maybe you want records, names, places. Maybe you won't. Whatever you choose is yours. There is no right way to be adopted. There is no correct emotional response. Anyone who tries to tell you how to feel can go bake their own damn bread. If you decide to look for your biological family, I want you to do it safely. Don't go along to meet strangers who share your blood. Meet in public. Bring someone you trust. Keep your own transportation. You'd think I wouldn't have to say that, but I'm a grandmother. It's my job to worry even from the grave. If you decide not to look, that's okay too. Blood is information. Love is history. You already have a history. You're not empty. Now the final wisdom. The one truth I learned, the one thing I wish someone had grabbed me by the shoulders and told me when I was young and scared and trying to be good. Here it is. Life is mostly made of ordinary minutes, and you don't know which ordinary minute is going to become sacred until it's gone. That's it. That's the whole thing. You think the important parts will announce themselves: a wedding, a graduation, a funeral. But it's not that. It's Tuesday afternoon with someone you love at the kitchen table. It's the sound of a person washing dishes while you dry them. It's the stupid argument about what movie to watch. It's the first bite of something warm when you didn't realize you were starving. So don't postpone tenderness. Don't save the truth for later like you're guaranteed a later. Tell people what they are to you. Tell them the thing you're afraid will make you cry. Cry anyway. Crying doesn't kill you. Secrets do, slowly. And if you can, be the kind of person who makes other people feel safe in the room with you, you will have done something holy with your life. Even if you never get a medal, even if nobody writes your name in a book. If you made people feel less alone, you mattered. Emma, I'm sorry. I'm proud of you. I love you. And I don't know how to end this. I really don't. I keep thinking there's supposed to be a sentence, a perfect last line, something that sounds wise and clean. But my life wasn't clean. It was flowery and messy and sometimes too salty and sometimes sweet enough to make you close your eyes. So I'm just going to say it the way I said it on the phone every time, the way I said it when you left my house with a container of leftovers in your hands. All right, okay. Be good. Eat something. And goodbye. Goodbye, sweetheart.